Licensing and Public Protection Committee. So welcome. First item is usual notice of recording and webcast. I advise the meeting to note that this meeting will be webcast for live or subsequent broadcast via the Council's meeting YouTube site, and that members of the press and public may record and take photographs except where there are confidential or exempt items. Any declarations of interest? No, thank you very much. And then apologies, I've had notified to me apologies from Councillor Martin Straker-Welds and also Councillor Diane Donaldson. And can I say I'm pleased to welcome to the meeting today on item 5, the Village Green application, Councillor Jenkins from who represents Mere Green Ward, and this is in his ward, and he'll be invited to say something about the application when we reach that.
Yeah.
Yes.
On apologies, Councillor Nicky Brennan has got a tooth problem.
Oh dear. I sympathise, should we all do? Okay, thank you for that. So minutes to confirm and sign minutes. Yes. Well, can I just confirm there was a correct record first? Can we agree the minutes?
Could I just add, I was down as attending at the last meeting, but I was absent. So just being perfectly honest, you might want to make that adjustment.
Thank you for that. So that is a correction to the minutes then. And if we can agree the minutes now. Thank you. And now Councillor Sharp would like to raise a point on the minutes. Thank you.
Can I ask if you've met with the council regarding people at traffic lights?
Yes. We did have a meeting. I'm trying to remember whether you were there.
I was
yes,
there.
That's right. You were there. That's right. Yes. The interim assistant director and myself met with Councillor Cotton to talk about the issue. I had also made a submission reflecting the views the committee stated a couple of meetings ago to the previous consultation around what are they called, public
space protection.
That's right. So that was a separate consultation. So some input went in from the committee then. We had a discussion with Councillor Cotton, and again, I reiterated the points that have been made here about the need for a specific policy looking at the begging at junctions, which, as we know, is still going on, despite the passage of the previous proposals in the city centre. Councillor Cotton agreed with me that he would actually write to Councillor Sharp, setting out the current position, but I don't think he's done that yet.
Well, he sent me an email which stage he's passed it on to local partnership delivery group, whoever they may be.
Okay.
I can advise on that.
That's the community safety partnership,
that's
basically,
correct,
isn't it? Yeah. So which one has he sent that on to, I wonder, Paul?
Well, my feelings, Chair, I've had the email in 22nd of November, right? And coming home the other night, I've seen 4 people getting out of a van, being dropped off by people, and then another 4 people being picked up by the same van. And all this is, whether people like the expression or not, is modern day slavery.
Yes, it is.
And if we haven't got the guts of the city council to start looking into this seriously, then something will happen to one of these poor people, and then we'll have egg on our faces. And it's about time that we came down on these people. It's not difficult to track them down, because I've seen the police that drove past the people at the lights and haven't even bothered to speak to them. These people are very vulnerable. I mean, you know, we cannot go on just that, because I've seen them a person get out of a van and collect the money off these people. I know if they're doing that, as I've just said, that is no less, than modern day slavery. And it's about time we sort it out as a council. And if we haven't got the powers, we've got enough MPs now in Birmingham to try and get us the powers to get this sorted out.
Okay, well, I mean, what I can do is go back to Councillor Cotton, but he implied that they were going to contact you, Councillor Sharp, didn't he?
I'll follow that, Chair.
But so I'll ask the assistant director to follow that up, because we
with all respect, Chair, I mean, I leave in May, so I hope somebody will pick it up after May.
Yeah. Well, as I say, I have spoken to him and I will keep talking to him. I did want him to come to the committee, but for various reasons, he wasn't able to do that. And I'm disappointed really by that, because I think, if an issue is raised by the committee, then the cabinet member ought to really respond directly. Councillor Locke.
I agree with all that Councillor Sharp has said, but also I think we've got to think about what's going on in the Ukraine. There could be people coming over and people smuggling, that could happen. People could be used in that way to get over. So that is a worry also. Like he says, they are vulnerable people and they need protection and support. And that's what I wanted to say.
Okay.
If I may add, Chair.
Yes, please.
It does seem that Birmingham City Council and West Midlands Police are lions without teeth. They have the powers, but they're not willing to use them. I was driving through Perry Bar quite late one evening, and there were people. This is turned 11 o'clock at night. There were people still out collecting along the queues of traffic that's taking place in Perry Bar because of the construction of the A34. And it's unacceptable. It's unacceptable. And we've got to do something about it.
Councillor Locke.
And also, I'm sorry to be a nuisance, but also, you might get, I've been asked in local meetings, you get people, usually women driving home as well, and they may feel vulnerable and give them the money. I'm not saying they shouldn't have it, but it needs stronger teeth, a bit of power to try and do what they can from Parliament down, so that give us the teeth and the police to do more.
Councillor Higgs.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Very much agree with what the other councillors have raised. Could I suggest that we have a report on this for a future meeting? I think that will be very interesting to take a look at, to see what the council's doing on this matter. I saw them when I came in this morning, so it is an ongoing issue. So I appreciate we might have a new composition after the elections. But I think it's something that the new committee, whoever is sitting on it, will be interested in taking a look at.
Well, I would support that, and I think we should minute that the committee continue to be concerned at the continuing issue of begging at street junctions across the city, and requested a further report on this issue from the relevant sections of the council.
It's not just the begging, it's who's controlling them.
Yes, I think that's the point. I think what I will do, if we minute it in those terms, in terms of the committee's wishes, if you're happy with that, I'll follow this up again with the cabinet member and say, look, we need to know that there's really a plan to deal with this, because I think it's got lost in the general. There was a consultation going on, as we know, about the wider public space control orders, and it sort of got lost in that. And I think I quite agree with the committee members' comments that there is a specific issue here which appears to point to something sinister, whether it's human trafficking and the rest of that, in an organised way. And we would really like the police, particularly, to pay some attention to this. And I think that's the point we need to reinforce. So I'm very happy to take that away, and I will reinforce that personally to the cabinet member and to whoever else will listen. But we do need something beyond the gap of the election coming back to this committee, so that we can continue to keep gnawing at this particular bone, because quite rightly, as you say, it is a serious issue for the city. Okay. Thank you. I hope that you've got the minute on there. Yeah, good. Thank you very much for that, members. Okay, right, moving on to the first substantive item, and that's the Dugdale Crescent Village Green application report. So what I will do is ask Mr. Tarnip Singh Sidhu, who's here from legal, to talk about this briefly. You've got the report, the details are there. It is fairly unusual, but it falls within our powers. If you'd like to fill in some of the statutory background, that'd be helpful, I think.
Sure. Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. Yes, you have a report before you in relation to a site at Dugdale Crescent in Sutton New Hall Ward. The application for the registration of a town or village green has been submitted by local residents in respect of this parcel of land, which is actually city-owned. The governing process is set out in the Commons Act of 2006, as you'll see from the report. So we've gone through the process of publishing notices and so on of the application. There are no objections to this application, but notwithstanding the lack of objections, it's still necessary for the council as registration authority to satisfy itself that the statutory test is satisfied based on the evidence submitted by the applicant. So we've gone through that process and we have set out at 5.3 of the report the statutory test, which is that the applicant has to demonstrate that the land has, for not less than 20 years, a significant number of inhabitants of the locality or of any neighbourhood within the locality have indulged in multiple sports and pastime as of right and continue to do so at the time of the application. So the burden of proof is on the applicant, and the standard of proof is to the balance of probability. So is it more likely than not? And what we've done at 5.4 of the report, given that it's quite a legalistic, complex statutory test, we've broken it down into a series of bullet points to consider each component of the test and evaluated it against the supporting evidence submitted by the applicants. And you'll see that we conclude that each component of that test is satisfied based on the available evidence. There is no evidence to the contrary, and so we conclude that the application should be granted as submitted, and that LPPC is able to do that today. In other cases, it's been a number of years since the last Village Green application, but in the past where applications have been contested, on occasions it has been referred to an independent inspector to hold an inquiry in order to consider the competing evidence in more detail. But on this occasion, given that there is no objection, there's no contrary evidence, we feel that you have everything before you today to be able to reach a decision. And the recommendation is that the application is approved. I'd be happy to answer any further questions if you have any.
Okay. Let me just bring in Councillor Jenkins, who represents Mere Green, the ward in which this is, so that he can comment on this. Councillor Jenkins.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for allowing me to speak. It's Mere Green ward, by the way, just to, you said Sutton New Hall ward. Okay. Yes, thank you, Chair, for allowing me to speak on this. I entirely endorse and support the report of the City Solicitor, but it is, of course, in its nature very formal and very legalistic, as it should be. But I thought it would be helpful just to add a little bit of human interest to this as well. And I start off by thanking the residents and the Friends of the Green in particular, who are represented here today, who've done an incredible amount of excellent work over a period of, I think now nearly 3 years, to bring us to the point where this application is before you today. When the law was enacted in 2006 to allow this type of application, if there had been an archetypal village green in the minds of the legislators when they drafted the law, this would have been it. This is the perfect village green. It contributes so much to the locality and to the residents, and it's entirely appropriate that it be protected as a village green. As you may have heard a moment ago when I was speaking to Councillor Eddy, Dugdale Crescent is actually named after William Dugdale, who fought at the Battle of Edge Hill in 1642, and I understand donated the land to the people of the area for housing, and subsequently a lot of the housing that was built came out of the post-war period. So it's a very interesting area to attend. It's an excellent community. It's a great application, exactly as envisaged by Parliament, and I wholly commend it to the committee for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Jenkins. Thank you for that. Okay, any questions? Councillor Leddy.
Chair, it's not so much a question as a comment. Birmingham City Council's Parks Department are very good at convincing residents that we should have a natural habitat where village greens are concerned. And I would like to see a plan of sorts from Birmingham Parks Department regarding this plot of land, because other village greens around, or parts of village greens around the city, have become nothing but a bramble walkway. And I know one in particular in Druids Heath, where they wanted it to be more natural, and brambles have taken over, and Birmingham City Council do very little else apart from clear the walkways through the designated village green. And that's just one. There are others I can mention. So I think a plan from Birmingham Parks Department on what they want to do following the designation of a village green would be helpful.
I don't know whether there's any procedure for you to pass this on to them in some way and ask for their comments, or would comments have already been received from them?
Yeah, so they were notified of the application and did not object. The comments that's been made would go beyond the scope of the current application, in the sense that there's no designation as a village green wouldn't impose any positive duty to enhance the area. It would simply mean that it's protected from development which might compromise the law for sports and pastimes that have been demonstrated. So that would be very much at the discretion of the service area that manages the parcel land. This application would simply protect and preserve that land and ensure that it continues to be available for the sports and pastimes that have been demonstrated.
Yeah, but the Act allows it just to be used for leisure amenities, not development.
Yes, so it wouldn't allow the landowners to do anything with that land which would interfere with or compromise the sports and pastimes that have been demonstrated through this application.
Can I reassure Councillor Leddy as well that this is a village green? It's grass. The residents do a huge amount of work on it themselves. They arrange events. So I think your comments are well founded generally, but on this occasion, I'm not concerned that it'll fall into disrepair. It's been in good shape for a long time, and they look after it.
I don't say it falls into disrepair. They always say that little plot there would be nice if it was nature conservation, and they don't do anything with it.
Seems as though there's enough sort of natural activity supported by the residents to make this a well-used space in the best possible sense. So
Very much so, Chair.
That's good to hear. Okay, are there any other comments or questions? Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Chair. I know Sutton Coldfield pretty well, though I have to admit I do not know Dugdale Crescent at all. But you've only got to look at the map to see that what Councillor Jenkins says is spot on. I mean, it would be sacrilegious to allow developments on something so prominent a feature in the middle of a housing estate. So I totally support the bid to protect this from future development. Absolutely. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Right, so the recommendation is that we approve the application for the registration of a town village green at the field, Dugdale Crescent, Sutton Coldfield. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Any against? No, that's unanimous. So thank you very much, and thank you, Councillor Jenkins, for coming along to give your view.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Okay, that's approved. So we're on to the first financial report, and David Jones is here. He's fine. Yeah. Thanks.
Whichever way.
So this is the monitoring report, Q3. So on these reports, I know, David, you have taken steps to set out more clearly some of the COVID impacts, which I think is of particular interest to members. But I mean, please say what you want by way of introduction on this report.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So the first financial report is Q3. So this is your financial performance for the year to the end of December. And the third quarter, the budget has increased by 125,000. And that's because of some IT recharge budgets that were centralised have now been handed back to us, and the costs are also going to come with those as well. So there's no pressure or benefit from that, other than the ring-fenced budgets and the trading accounts are more transparent and presented in a more understandable way as well. So the budget at the end of Q3 is £6.798 million. The agreed forecast is for a year-end pressure of £140,000. That's improved by 200,000 in the third quarter. And within that, you've got £550,000 of spend on COVID. So it's the COVID response work that your services are doing. So you can tell there's a lot of mitigation in there. There's over 400,000 in mitigations that services have found. Just to pick on two of the main services, so Registry Office, they had a lot of COVID spend, and that's now fully mitigated. That's because they've worked on the backlog of cases, on citizenship ceremonies, on weddings. So the weddings are now up to speed, and because the hospitality sector isn't quite up to speed, we're actually benefiting at the Registry Office from those as well. Also, Trading Standards, they're leading on the investigations into COVID fraud grant. So that's quite high profile at the moment. There's a lot of media coverage of that as well. So to mitigate that, they have reduced some of their premises costs. Their legal fees are also down, but that's because a lot of their cases are delayed. So we're expecting that to pick up again next financial year. The only service with additional pressures is really the corridor. That's mainly because there's the newly opened extra court building and IT costs that are associated with that as well. So if I can ask you to look at that's set out in Appendix 1. Appendix 2 is a new appendix. So this was requested at the last committee. So this sets out the COVID work per service area. It's a brief, so it shows the value and a brief explanation of what each service is doing. So it's not a transactional level. As I say, it was requested, information requested last time, so I hope that fills that gap. On Appendix 3 is the normal licensing breakdown, and Appendix 4 is your grants, so legal money lending and the regional intelligence team. Those look okay against their gross budgets, but there's odd variations at the bottom because the illegal money lending team have actually received their full year grant, and the regional intelligence team are the other way around. They're actually 1 quarter behind on receiving their grant. So just to explain, illegal money lending, that's at the end of December, they had received their full year funding. So it's a bit odd in terms of timing, but we're not going to turn down the income on that. And Appendix 5 is your reserves, with licensing deficit still being our main concern there. So in summary, the budget has improved, the year-end forecast pressure has improved, and as before, the majority of that pressure is attributed to the work that you're doing on COVID. So I hope that was clear and helpful. If you've got any questions, I'll do my best to answer them now. If I can't answer them now, I'll do a written response.
We've got the second report, which is the revenue budget as well. But any questions on this for the moment? Councillor Led?
No, I'm just thinking £500,000,
Okay.
given the difficulties, is a drop in the ocean.
Yeah, on Appendix 2. Yeah. Okay. Well, can we approve the recommendations at 2? Agreed. Okay. And then on to report 7, which is the revenue budget. So David Jones again.
Thank you, Chair. Hang on. This is the budget for next financial year. So your current budget, as per that last report, is 6.798 million. This will increase by 842,000 for the new financial year. So at the start of the financial year, your budget will be 7.64 million pounds. The main changes well, the first change is a corporate allocation of 160,000 for the coroner's service, and that's to reflect the increased costs of post-mortems. Then there's the employer's national insurance contributions. Those are going up 1.25%, and that's 1.25% of the salary. So it is still quite a large increase as well. So an extra 129,000 allocated there, and then energy costs over above the normal inflation. So there's an initial allocation of £15,000 there, but there could be more in the financial year. About half of the allocation was held back corporately. We're waiting to see what happens with the energy market, and it's not looking very positive at the moment. So there could be an additional allocation during the financial year. The combined inflation and the pay award, and that includes the pay award for the current year, 21-22, where you didn't receive a budget. So that's £718,000, and that's partly offset by your fees and charges inflation, £338,000. So that's extra income we're expecting to be generated. And finally, some additional divisional adjustments just to ensure that the ring-fenced budgets and the grant budgets are balanced and start the year on the right footing. So that everything I've just said is set out in Appendix 1. I'll just ask you to look at Appendix 2. So Appendix 2 shows you your new budgets per service in broad subjective groups. So if you can just note the two grant schemes, so RIT and illegal money lending, they may change once we get formal confirmation of what their grants allocate, what their grant income is going to be. It won't affect the bottom line, they're going to remain net neutral. Appendix 3 is, again, it's the changes we've already discussed, but it sets out the future year's changes. So the only real structural change ahead is for the coroner. So the coroner has a service level agreement with West Midland Police that steps down every 2 or 3 years. And the final step down in that external funding is 2023-24. And that's the final 90,000. That service level agreement will then come to an end. And the council budget will step in and just increase by 90,000 just to fill the gap in that funding. Appendix 4 is the reserves and their usual recommended use of reserves during the coming year. So in summary, your budget allocations have increased from your current value. There's increased allocation for the coroner, for the post-mortem cost, and there's allowances for national insurance, pay award, and the energy increases as well as the general inflation. So again, I hope that was clear. Any questions? I will try and answer them now.
Any questions or comments?
Chair, will there, I mean, later on in the agenda, we're talking about licensing of HMOs. That money will come into our budget heading. Which heading will that actually go into? Licensing or what?
Yeah, it'll be separate at the moment.
It'll be a separate heading.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm looking. I will admit that electronically, perhaps the committee manager, electronically, half of the papers are missing. But, you know, I haven't got all the details and I can't see which heading that or those fees will be provided into.
Are the papers not fully on scene with stuff?
No.
Chair, we'll look at that then
Yes.
after the meeting.
I was just wondering which heading it'll go into.
All right, I see.
It will be a separate line because that in its own right has to break even anyway. So it will be a budget.
Any surpluses.
Yeah.
In the same way as all licensing fees.
Yes.
Becomes ring fenced.
Someone to my right who will be all over that.
Oh, I know. It's just that I can't see it, and I can't see where any potential surpluses may may come about.
So, I mean, I suppose in terms of your overview then, David, perhaps the biggest unpredictable then is energy costs, which we're all concerned about, isn't it? Is that, would that be fair to say?
That's a valid point, Chair. As I say, there is an amount being kept corporately at the moment, and once we have a better idea of what the energy market's doing, then additional allocations will be made.
Chair, to be fair, I think that's one of the unknowns, and that is corporately identified. It is a risk that's in the budgets there. The second element really is the demands on the coroner's service and the coronial service, which are increasing, and we have no way of controlling that budget.
Okay. Okay. Yes.
Just getting back to that, what contingency do you have if you were to go over this budget? Because, I mean, as is quite rightly been said, there are going to be a lot of financial pressures, in particular inflation. What happens if you go over that 7.6?
Overspend.
Chair, there's
Yeah.
Okay, Chair, there's two or three ways. One would be seeing that the service has to see if it can have any mitigations, much like we did with COVID, where actually, if you looked at our budget, it looks like it's 100,000 overspent. We're actually about 400,000 underspent because we've actually picked up a lot of the COVID restrictions. So it depends what time of the year. If something came in very late in the financial year, it's more difficult to mitigate. But hopefully we've either had a better financial performance through additional income in one of the other services that can offset what's happened. In the past, we have stopped. We've put a suspension of recruitment to actually try and deal with that when we've got vacant posts. But it is all a matter of what's most appropriate at the time, what creates the less risk to the city council of not meeting its statutory duties. So if there's a discretionary activity, we would fall back on that and transfer work to the statutory duties. So it is a balancing act. I think we've got a little bit better at it in recent times, and I think that you're not seeing the budget deficits that perhaps were in place a couple of years ago. So, and that's because we are managing it much more tightly.
Yeah, I mean,
inflation is completely out. Yeah.
I think inflation is going to be what happens.
Yeah. Well, as we know, there are certain factors outside our control driving all that, but it's one to watch clearly. Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Paul mentioned, suspending recruitment. I mean, if that has to happen, that puts added pressure on the staff that you've got. You've got to do the same or more with less, and it's like an elastic band. How far will it stretch?
I think that generally the regulation enforcement services and the enforcement's under control in this committee, the highways enforcement, are critically staffed. So any reduction in staffing will normally impact on something, either lengthen response times or mean that the elements that we do as an advisory service probably have to be dropped in favour of the demands that are strictly statutory duties. And that happens the whole time. When that happens, we have a method within the City Council of escalating that up. So it's known within corporate leadership team that there is an issue and that there might have to be a prioritisation from other services that are not statutory into those that are.
Okay. Okay, right. So can we accept the recommendations then at point 2 to note the report, generally the 4 parts of the report? Agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Thank you, David, for a very clear exposition of the position. Thank you very much. Okay, we're on to regulation enforcement fees and charges report, which I think is the annual review, if I'm right, isn't it, Paul?
It is. We've got the licensing and public protection fees. So the reviews of those. Chair, this is a report that you've had every year, and we haven't changed its format at all. We've had advice from David and his colleagues about where we need to be with any chargeable rates and hourly rates. Those are set out within the report, along with a series of appendices which cover all of the service areas within your within the committee's budget. I think I'm assuming everyone has read the report, so I'm not going to go through it individually, but if there's any questions, I'm happy to take them. But we've tried to actually just mirror the costs of the service, put in the appropriate amount to do our recovery, because most of the services under control of the committee are ring fenced or trading. So we're trying to actually ensure that we're doing this in the appropriate way. The last one is, I just will draw out Appendix 5 actually has the Civico building consultancy charges, which come to this committee, although that's undertaken by a wholly owned publicly owned company of Birmingham City Council. But just to let you know that those are there. Happy to take any charges, any questions or any other matters. If we can't answer them today, as David said in the previous report, we'll come back on those individual elements.
Yeah, glad you pointed that out.
Yep.
Yeah, it's something I raise all. I'm not going to raise it on this committee, but Civico is central procurement.
Point noted.
I can't possibly comment on anything to do with that, Chairman.
I think a number of members are sympathetic to the view, I'm afraid. Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Chair. I can believe that the format hasn't changed, and the reason is that I notice on page 59 there's a table setting out what the treatments are for pests, and in regarding mice, it says that poison is available free from neighbourhood offices. Now, to my knowledge, correct me if I'm wrong, we don't have any neighbourhood offices. So the obvious question is, where is poison for mice available?
Okay, Chair, I'll have to follow up, Councillor Ward, and I'll get you an answer within 7 days on that. So, okay.
Thank you.
The ancient lift and paste, isn't it? Considering when did the neighbourhood offices cease?
There are still some housing.
There's still
offices.
some. There's housing, yeah.
Oh, there are a couple, aren't there? Yeah.
But I just want to ensure they are available from there.
Thank you for that point, Councillor. We'll get, we need to check that out.
Okay.
I'm sorry,
No, go on, Mary. I'm just looking you on draft.
Sorry, Councillor Leddy was next, actually. Then I'll come to Councillor Locke.
I was about to ask, Chair, there are a number of fees that are set in statute, and it's a shame that they are set in statute. So is it worthwhile that with the interim director and his colleagues in other West Midlands authorities getting together and writing to the government to get government to look at those fees and giving them a realistic setting? Thinking in particular the registry office.
Well, I'll let Sajila come in there on one element at the moment of that, but I think the general point about writing to government on fees not making, if you like, not meeting the return, they effectively cost us rather than actually do that, and certainly many in the licensing area are like that as well. But Sajila will tell you about some work that's going on at the moment with regards to Register Office. So,
yeah, thank you. Through you, Chair. Yes, Councillor Ledley, we're already working with the General Register Office to review those fees on a national level with our colleagues across the country, and all register offices are saying the same thing. So we're hoping that in the next 12 months we start getting some movement. It won't be as a total. My understanding, it won't be all fees will be changed at the same time, but we'll start reviewing certain fees and making that progression to at least meeting costs, which I think is essential, because you quite rightly point out they're not covering costs.
Okay, good. Okay, thank you for that. And obviously we'll take that point back about the mice poison.
Chair, yes, I'll check that sort of immediately. I'll get back just to make sure what's happening there and where it is available, and hopefully be able to give a list of where it is available from as well, not just those.
That's what I was going to ask. Because, over the 69 wards, it would be useful.
Yeah.
Yeah, sort of thing we certainly might get an inquiry back as members, wouldn't we? Yeah. Okay, got a lot of detail in here. Anything else you want to pick up on?
No, Chair, but just to seek approval of the recommendations 2.1 to 2.10, which is on page 39 and 40 of the agenda.
Great. Nothing else from members? Have we agreed? Okay, we agree with the recommendations. Thank you very much. Right.
The next ones are definitely Sajila, Chair.
Yes, that's right. Yes, hand this hot potato to you.
Thank you, Chair. As members will be aware, private rented sector came within the Regulation, Enforcement and Licensing and Public Protection Committee portfolio in September 2021. Along with that function, there is a specific team that licenses mandatory HMOs, and those are HMO, houses of multiple occupation, with more than 5 people. The licensing fees for those HMOs was last reviewed in April 2018. As you're aware, we like to review our fees annually. So I've conducted that review to ensure that we have accurate cost recovery. As you're aware, we are legally entitled to recover reasonable costs for administering the scheme, including enforcement elements. Clearly, we've had insufficient staffing in the past few years due to the fee level, which has resulted in some negative impacts, including a backlog of assessments of HMO applications. In our proposed new process from April the 1st, we will also be including pre-licence inspections. That means the application will come to us, we will review it, but we will also go out to the premises to check the paper information that we have reflects what we find on the ground. Licences can be issued for a period of up to 5 years, but we can determine a shorter licence depending on specific issues, which includes where there is, for instance, the need to regulise something between planning and HMOs. So someone might apply for an HMO licence, but they haven't got the planning approval that is necessary. In those circumstances, case law shows that we can issue a licence for, say, 1 year to allow that regularisation to occur. The proposed new fees are split into application fee and licence fee as required by law. There are different fees depending upon the size of the HMO, because that will obviously entail more work that is required by officers. You will note that there's an additional cost for a paper application because over the last few years, obviously everything is now electronic. That is the most efficient and effective way to receive an application and ensure that it has all the information that is required. We'll also be offering a service relating to advising applicants. There will no longer be a reduction for landlords who are members of an accreditation scheme. And the reason for this is that being a member of an accreditation scheme does not result in any less resource being required in assessing the application or in the pre-licence inspection or in the compliance visit for the HMO. There will also no longer be a reduction for renewal of a licence. Again, this is because there is no same amount of work is entailed in looking at a renewal because we have to start afresh, as there would be in looking at a brand new application. It is acknowledged that there is a cost increase, but we feel that this is necessary to ensure we deliver our statutory duties and process applications in a timely manner and ensure that we protect the health and safety of tenants. I did write to MLAS, Midland Landlord Accreditation Scheme, in December 2021, informing them of the intention to no longer have a reduction for their members and ask for them to respond to me by January. No response was received in regards to that. In terms of the delivery of the scheme, this is a ring-fence budget where we'll have carry forwards at the end of each year, and we'll be annually reviewing the costs of the fees and charges. So I would ask members to approve the recommendations, which is that the fees shown in Appendix 1 will take effect from the 31st of March for applications where a new fee would be issued in the financial year licence to be issued in financial year 2023, or where a late application was received on the 31st of March 2022, or later for a licence that expired at any time before. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, you've got all the detail there. Any questions, Councillor Lady?
This does not include exempt accommodation, is that correct?
Thank you, Chair. No, Councillor Lady, exempt accommodation don't require a licence.
And the biggest cause of problems in Birmingham presently is exempt accommodation, is that correct?
Certainly a view in relation to refuse and antisocial behaviour and other neighbourhood issues.
That's a very good political answer there, is what I will say. I think Sajila is right. The exempt sector is regulated by sort of a national regulator rather than local regulator, although some work is going on, and we are part of an initiative we are doing between HMOs and the exempt side, is actually trying to improve that whole liaison from it. I think, Chair, when we come to sort of a certain time frame, I think it might be worthwhile the committee seeing a larger report on exempt, even though it isn't really in the auspices of the committee, because we can't regulate it. But I think it would probably be useful for colleagues in housing to come with us to actually to come to committee. So that may be a suggestion for you. It is a headache because there are so many exempt pieces of exempt accommodation, but I know colleagues in housing are working hard to ensure we identify all of those and be absolutely clear whether they are or not. Councillor Locke.
Councillor Locke, yeah.
I don't know, headache, I would say migraine really. With exempt accommodation, that maybe, you say about a larger piece, but maybe looking at what other councils are doing and, beefing up something to get stronger regulations for the government.
A flippant answer says to me they're taking strong paracetamol because it is actually a problem right across the nation, really. But I don't have any issue with us on your behalf if we worked with them after we had that, I think, the report, with us making representations to government. And I think it's obviously difficult now between now and the local elections, but after May, and you've had a report, I think it might be worthwhile.
Okay, Councillor Morrell.
Yeah, I agree with what's said. Exempt accommodations, in particular, also give a bad reputation to HMOs themselves. Let's not forget that HMOs, a lot of young professionals live in them. In particular, I know in Councillor Lockwood and Study Oak around that sort of area. I know Bobby Oldham has a problem with this in Erdington. But it really is the exempt accommodation. It's like what Councillor Levy said, is the fact that we don't license them, and that's the whole point of them, is that they're rogue estates. They're allowed to do what they want. And my dad actually, he used to fit double glazing, and now he's a maintenance guy, and he goes around and fits maintenance to some of these exempt accommodations. And some of the stories he tells me, it's just genuinely shocking. And we do need to clamp down on this, because it's not just a case of the people that live there are vulnerable. It's also because a lot of the young professionals who live in the HMOs are also getting a bad rap when they just that they can't afford to rent. It's economically beneficial to them. So I agree with something that does need to, and I'm aware that there's a motion from the council.
Yeah. Yes, I think we're all aware of the impact, because certainly it's manifesting my ward in areas, and it is just the frustration as an elected member of not being able to do anything really. And of course, this is why we have been lobbying for some time for more powers, and the 25 ward scheme. That's about that, isn't it? Which will bring in some a pilot attempt to. It won't cover exempt. Well, there we are. See, that's the complication, isn't it?
All I'm about to say, Chair, is the fact that I would have thought the government would have woken up to the fact that it is spending billions on exempt accommodation, because we don't spend it, Birmingham City Council don't spend it. We are the agents of the government in handing out housing benefit, and you know it's got to be. And it's not just the Conservative government; the Labour government did it as well. But it's only in the last 10 years maximum that it has really been abused, at least noticed in Birmingham as being abused. And we've had HMOs ever since we've had universities, and students have lived in, for better words, bed sits, HMOs, shared houses, whatever you want to call them. So we know about them in Birmingham, and most of those landlords are reasonable. I'm not saying they're brilliant, but they're reasonable. But it is the exempt accommodation where Tom is in cahoots with Dick, and Dick employs Harry, and they're all directors of the original company, but they also registered as an exempt provider.
Yep. Chair, I just wanted to record my personal thanks that since it came over in September 2021, the lady on my right has worked tirelessly to get this service into a position where I now can say we're comfortable, we're going steadily in the right direction for this, and I think that you will see better services from the private rented sector over the coming months. But I hope committee would endorse that thanks to Sajeela, because I think she's done a fantastic job.
Yes, we're very happy to endorse that, and it's moving in the right direction. So there is more focus and control, which is good.
And it's a good thing.
Yeah, but we would certainly like to see a future paper where the mesh between exempt and HMOs and so on is examined, because this is clearly not an issue which is going to go away soon. Okay, so can we accept the report, endorse the recommendations on the HMO fees and charges? Agreed? Okay, thank you very much. Right, so next one is the usual prosecutions and cautions report. You've got all the detail.
We're happy to take any questions there may be, Chair. So you've got an analysis of the major ones within the paper on page 82. Apart from that, you've got a full list of them all. If there's anything that you want to have any further questions on, please just let us know and we'll.
Just by way of report from me as well, the overview and scrutiny, I can't remember the name of which one it was, we're doing an inquiry into fly tipping, and they were
in the neighbourhoods, the chair.
Thank you very much for that. That's it. I can never remember the long title.
And it's tomorrow, the next one.
And I attended at their invitation to comment about fly tipping and the use of fixed penalty notices. They had investigated the issue of other councils' alleged more active use of fixed penalty notices for fly tipping, Barking and Dagenham particularly, they cited. Again, colleagues who are on the committee, Councillor Locke and other colleagues will know more about this and the study than I did. But what I said to them was that obviously the opportunity to examine how we use particular mechanisms like the fixed penalty notices, which are very effective for littering, of course, because you see somebody do it, the enforcement officer sees them, gets the details, and it's a fixed penalty notice. They're often about the circumstance, and given the clandestine nature of fly tipping, it's more difficult. But I suggested to them that if they wanted to review the enforcement policy, and that is a cabinet responsibility, not this committee, but we would obviously be consulted on that. I understand, and the officers will correct me if I'm wrong, that there's likely to be a review later in the year.
Sooner rather than later, Chair.
Right.
Because we have to have something in place before the Commonwealth Games.
Yeah. And we're all interested in obviously more effective enforcement on fly tipping. So that may be an issue which they want to put before the in that review. And so that was the gist of my general comments to the committee.
We'll ensure that's included.
Okay. Anything you want to raise on any of the specifics here? No? Okay. Can we note the report? Thank you. Okay, so now we're on to item 11, which is the Commonwealth Games update and the regulatory framework that is being developed for that. So it's over to the Assistant Director.
Thank you, Chair. This you have had a copy of the presentation, so I won't go into every single detail of it. Again, I'll assume people have read that, but I'll draw out some salient points. Obviously, one of the things about the Commonwealth Games is that we as a service are probably most heavily involved during the games because there's a lot there, but that doesn't mean there's not a lot of work going on beforehand. And there's been about a 2-year lead in on serious work relating to the Commonwealth Games and how we deal with it. We will cover all areas of the portfolio that I'm responsible for managing, but except for the coroner's support, bereavement, registration. All of the other elements are heavily involved in this. So the Commonwealth Games itself involves 9 local authorities, the 9 venue authorities, plus others that are impacted by some trading and advertising restrictions because the controlled zones that there are go over the border of some venue authorities into other authorities. So that happens in at least 3 of the actual areas. It also covers metropolitan authorities, but also counties and districts in 2-tier. And for counties, trading standards are a service at that level, but environmental health licensing is at the district council level. So it does create a complexity that's there. We'll also have, it'll be our principal activity. Birmingham will be on display to the world from mid-July to mid-August, probably a lot earlier than that. But it was so much more. So what's our role in trying to sort this out? I think I wanted to make sure you're aware the logistics planning, which is probably more detailed than I've had to do in my whole career, is what we've been doing for the Games, trying to establish what level of enforcement officer we're going to require, the numbers on each of the days, at each of the times of the days, and going through with any pilot events. So it is quite there, but our primary focus is ensuring public safety during the Games. We'll still have to meet business as usual. There'll still be ongoing issues raised by the public all round Birmingham and by members, I'm sure, around Birmingham in the weeks of the Games. But we also need to make sure that how we enforce takes into account how the other 8 venue authorities also enforce. Now, what that means is, in general terms, when we have an enforcement policy, if someone contravenes legislation, we will try to give a person a warning before we take enforcement action, formal enforcement action. But if you imagine there might be traders who go from site to site, they could go to 9 different authorities and create that 9 warnings effectively, which is entirely unacceptable because then it's not a level playing field. So we're having to put in intelligence systems for ensuring that if something comes from one authority, that's the warning. They go to another authority, then enforcement action is taken for any trader who's trying to get, if you like, an advantage from not complying with the law. So strategically for the city, it's a key task in the City Council's delivery plan. It will be the key thing for up till September for us, because also ensuring we get the legacy for the future. And we will also have to ensure that the city's at the best it possibly can be, because it pays no one for the city to be denigrated by virtue of some aspects of the city not being appropriate. So the Birmingham Commonwealth Games Act 2020 placed duties on relevant local authorities. So those are the venue authorities, plus those with areas. It introduced provision for compensation for incorrect enforcement. It's probably the provision that's caused us least angst, because it's already in legislation, and if we're enforcing incorrectly, we deserve to pay compensation. That's the sort of angle we take. We haven't had to for as many years as I think most of the staff can remember. So why would we need to have something specific there? But that's where we are on it. It introduced advertising and trading restrictions in designated areas around venues and event routes. So if you imagine we've got this typical venue that might be the Alex Stadium we all know about, but then you've also got the marathon, which actually goes across the city. So there's actually controls going across the whole of that route that we have to make sure are properly dealt with. The organising committee have a way of authorising existing businesses to do things, so that they can advertise in those areas, but under certain controls. You may recall that pavement licences came in to help business following the pandemic. Well, when the regulations were extended, or the laws extended on that, they extended them to September 2022. So that goes into the Commonwealth Games. So we've now got to think about the pavement licences, how that impacts on the Commonwealth Games Act, and what sort of controls are there, and there has to be an additional authorisation given by the OC to trade in that area. Similarly for the street trading activities. So it's quite an involved activity. We've got a statutory duty to actually notify businesses who would be impacted by this area. So that's in there, and a little bit more on that later on in the presentation. Other provisions include brand protection and ticket touting. Ticket touting being a very interesting one, because it's not normally gets into a local authority area. It's normally dealt with by police, and certainly with tickets being electronic, that's normally led by City of London Police nationally on that. So there's an involvement there that we have to ensure we are acting in accordance with what might be around. For us in the games, licensing of sports grounds, we've now, instead of a designated stadium at the Alexander Stadium, where we've got designated stand, we've got a designated stadium. So actually we will now have another one similar to the Blues, Edgbaston, and another ground I can't remember in Birmingham.
Hallowed
People are so jealous.
Then
stadium.
We know it too well now the council meetings are being held there.
Yeah. Trading standards has got the Commonwealth Games Act, and so doing an awful lot of work and ensuring that that's going on, and that's from the time the provisions came in and moving forward. Environmental health, we've been doing enhanced water sampling at Powell's Pool. We've been doing obviously the food safety side, approving what the OC are doing in letting their contracts for food and their food safety standards, the health and safety at work, and infection control. Even a much bigger now with the possibility, COVID, pandemic, flus, avian flu, all of those things are all sort of adding to some complexity for us. As I mentioned before, the street trading. Emergency planning and business continuity. We're drawing up special arrangements for the games, but we've still got the routine, if you can call them routine, emergencies that happen every day of the year for different things, and we'll still be dealing with those. So we deal with the agreeing of the organising committee standards and the enforcement consistency, not just with our venue authorities, but also with West Midlands Police, Health and Safety Executive, and what used to be Public Health England, the UK HSA Health Security Agency. And then litter enforcement, which obviously is something that's important to us all, and it will help the city. So resource requirements were required for additional staff across the board. We needed that because we can't actually do a two-shift system during the games, and we haven't got enough staff to do that. So it's changing everything the way we do it. We've got lots of training, and we've got also the additional water sampling I mentioned before. So we've identified those resource requirements on a daily basis, and we've restricted leave for staff during the games because that's just something we had to do to ensure we've got enough people around. We've also got some additional resources, and it will be announced today formally by the Food Standards Agency that we've actually got additional money for, which will be the equivalent of employing 4 environmental health officers to enhance food standards within the city. So that's something that's good. It's something that we're looking at for the food safety around venues, villages, festival sites, hotels and Zone X, but also business support, a sampling program, Allergens and Communications. I'll pause just after this bit, just to note on allergens, that wasn't in the legislation back in 2012 when we had London 2012 and prior to that, obviously the Glasgow Commonwealth Games. So that's a new issue that's come in that we're putting greater focus on. Councillor Locke indicated, Chair.
The emphasis will be on the whole city of Perivale and everything, but also I feel personally the rest of the city is on display too, and
absolutely
its residents, and I feel people may want to visit. They could want to come to visit Cadbury's, or may want to come and sample the microbreweries and everything else where I am. And you know, that's on display, and the businesses in and around all of the city need to be get advantage, and also the residents as well, so that they can enjoy everything that will be going on during the Commonwealth Games and afterwards. The legacy after, I feel, is important.
Chair, I'll come on to that in a moment. There's a couple of things there, but that's absolutely right.
Yeah. Just on the back of that point, did I hear correctly that there's no advertising? Or is it limited?
It's controlled. It's a controlled in zone. So if you think about advertising, if we've got a shop outside there, a private shop that's got its normal festival, which shows a sign, that would not be controlled in any way. However, if you've got a pavement license outside and you've got sort of things there, you've got tables and you've got parasols, and the parasols have a splash of advertising saying something might be there, that is looked at, because it may be that all of the major sporting events have primary sponsors, and it's whether there's any conflict with that sponsors. Yeah. So it's around that, but it's also trying to ensure that Birmingham 2012, Commonwealth Games 2012 is not used, because that actually is brand protected. So there's things of that nature. It's a free application for authorisation through the OC, but there would be advice given about what you can and can't do, which is why we have to get the information out. And so coming on from that, but it was there. But we've also done some secondment work and given it a chance with the UK HSA, as I was Public Health England, to actually have member staff who's reviewing all of the outbreak control plans, but not just for us, for all the venue authorities. So we're getting the best of all worlds put together, so we actually get, if you like, best practice for each of the authorities and how we approach it. We are looking at mutual aid, and we are trying to get authorities who may be able to release staff for a short period of time during the games to enhance our staffing levels and actually pay for that at cost for those individual authorities. We've so far got 6 authorities. I've just got a 6th one that's just come in now, who will be potentially providing staff for us. You can either be a requesting authority or a responding authority. A requesting authority says, we need help, can someone help us? And responding authorities once say, yes, we can. We will probably fit into both categories, because we may be able to provide some of our regulatory staff, but not others, depending upon what we've got. So we will look at that and manage that resources appropriately. In terms of our general thing, I mentioned enforcement policy. We'll have an addendum to our own enforcement policy that deals with how we will enforce the Commonwealth Games Act. We expect that probably to be a portfolio holder decision, but it will be obviously on there, allowable for the overview and scrutiny committees to review it as and when. We did a major review 2 years ago, wasn't it? I think, Sajid? Yeah, 2019, getting on for 3 years ago. Before COVID, we didn't get the chance during the last 2 financial years to actually do that. That's why we're sort of going into another review at the moment. We're looking at having optimum operating procedures, all the same, so it all happens the same way, joint training, and actually we've put in place a new safety advisory group process for the Commonwealth Games that for any events organised by the organising committee, and then separate the business as usual. So we apply the resource to business as usual, but the OC have a different arrangement that we're trying to coordinate. So how are we approaching it? We've got 6 venues within this city area. So we've arranged, plus festival and live sites, we've arranged 3 clusters. But I'm going to say we've got a 4th cluster, and I'll explain what that 4th cluster is. So we've got Sutton Park and Alexander Stadium. So we're putting a team of officers who will be up there on site, knowing that site and knowing what's around it, to go between the venues to make sure that they're operated appropriately. And that's when they're in use. We've got a city centre cluster, which will be the National Indoor Arena, Smithfield City Centre. We've got, that includes Marathon, it's linked with that one. And then we've got Edgbaston and the University of Birmingham, those 2 together. But the 4th cluster is business as usual. We're actually applying staff to business as usual, as well as those 3 different elements. And that's really important to us to actually sort of work it through to make sure it's there. The day on the Commonwealth Games will start anything from 6 a.m. and finish 11 p.m. So that's not going to be one officer working through all of that time. It's going to be a shift system to get people working there and make it. I know. I didn't say the managers wouldn't be, Councillor Leddy. I said that for normally the officers. I do wish you wouldn't make such offers in public, Mary, but
I'm a lady.
Let's move on.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've put the resources down also for managers, the qualified environmental health officers, the qualified trading standards, qualified licensing officers, and then we've added some categories: enforcement officers and enforcement wardens. One of the things about the COVID marshals, they did work. They actually did some good eyes and ears work for us. So we're looking to actually make an enforcement warden that does eyes and ears, that escalates things when people aren't responding. So deal with it informally. If they can't be dealt with, let's get the people who are qualified to serve notices or to take other action as needs be. So that's something that we'll be putting in place. Additional resource that we haven't currently got. Our shift system is going to work from day -5. So 5 days before the Commonwealth Games. That's because we've got 2 test events, day -4, day -2. So we're having to apply that very, very carefully and make sure we've got the appropriate people there. It allows us to train, and then to day 12, the day after, because in case there's any clear up that needs to be done after that. And as I say, we'll be working in 2 shifts. In dealing with businesses, we're using a 3-stage approach. We've told them now, we've got out to all businesses pretty much now to actually give them a letter, say that's what needs to be done. You need to know about these provisions, you need to there. We'll remind them again in April. And then after that in June, they'll be visiting, and we'll have the enforcement wardens out to visit those premises to make sure they're aware of what's going on. That, I believe, is something that will ensure that we can say we have complied with the statutory duty to inform businesses around those restricted areas. And actually, we've actually also been briefing representative business organisations. So once we sent the letter out, they asked for briefings. We do that, we'll do it again, and whatever they request, whether that be bids or Small Business Association or Chamber of Commerce, we are willing to sort of meet with them.
That was very nice. Does that include businesses along the marathon route?
Yes,
well?
yes, yeah.
Can we have, when you send the remarks?
We can send them out to committee if you want. If committee would like a copy, we'll give that.
People say, we haven't had any.
Yes.
I can send them out.
Yeah. We'll put that in. That's all right. I can get that circulated. And that approach we're doing is one that's also being adopted by all the other venue authorities, and we provide them with our correspondence as well, so that they can actually see that. It's up to them whether they use it, but we're saying, but generally they are adopting that. So the food law enforcement, and you've got an item later on in the agenda, Chairman. I think it's the next item, isn't it? Is actually about the Food Standards Agency recovery plan and how we get ahead on that. And that's moving forward. The licensing, we've set what we call deliverables and expectations so that we can get assurance for any events. So we're making sure that all of our partner agencies also know what's going on, and they sign off to say, we are happy with what's being proposed. Then I might put my signature on safety certificates. So it's that sort of thing that's there. But all in all of those things that we've still got to do are actually there. The finalising of staffing schedules, something bound to happen on the day people can't do. So what have we got for support? How can we ensure business continuity as well? And finalise this training. We're not doing training until after April, and it's more likely to be June where the focus is. And there is a reason for that. It's because staff leave. I want to actually get the training focused so that we're getting maximum value for money with it. And you know, the small thing we probably got to do is deliver a safe and great games, you know, which is something that is incumbent on us all. I think whatever our views of it, it's happening. So actually we should be trying to make sure it's the best possible. So what will be the legacy for your enforcement teams? Well, I think I do one thing. The improved capacity through more knowledge of staff. That if people know more about their job, they'll be able to do more things and without having to refer to stuff. So that's good capacity building. Enforcement consistency across the partners and better relationships and working between the West Midlands authorities. It was something that was always a care, working outside of the conurbation. We always used to hear it was Big Brother Birmingham. They knew everything, no one else did. Actually, that's broken down completely in the work that I've seen, where actually, oh, you're doing that? That's really interesting. What if you did this as well? And people are coming back with ideas, and the better relationships are even looking at people saying, we're struggling enforcing these things. If we joined up with other authorities, we might be able to enforce better. So there is actually that as a process going on at the moment.
Just wanted to add as well, I think during COVID as well, we learned a lot of stuff that we did, and it will help bring it forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And more use of intelligence database is something Trading Standards had. I actually found out about that within a meeting I was at from another authority. Didn't realise we used it. So it was something that's the sort of thing that comes out. Again, that sharing of knowledge, we know what's there. So really, Chair, that's a very quick run through of everything, showing everything that's there. It is a good logistical exercise. If members want to know, they want to come in and see how we're approaching it, more than happy to do that after the elections and people to come through. But I think that we're well set to deliver what we need to do and for the city to be proud of a really safe games that we'll deliver.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that perspective over in terms of a huge amount of work there, obviously, for not least licensing, public protection, all sections of the council. Councillor Leddy?
Councillor Sharp was up before. Okay, thank you, Chair. It is the biggest thing that's happened in Birmingham. The next biggest thing that happened was the G8 conference.
Yeah.
And I know, because I used to take part, the senior management team of the City Council would do walkthroughs, literally, physically, walking around the city, around the various venues from Five Ways down to the ICC, and then drive-throughs. And I'm wondering whether the senior management team are planning to do those, because there's an awful lot of detritus around Birmingham.
I think that it's fair to say the current interim chief exec ensures that is happening. She's very much committed to that. She's goes around a lot of the venues, but as we all do.
Is that the local? But I'm talking about.
No, it's everywhere.
City centre to the venues.
I think there's also a programme of ward visits going on, which are also being used, and I know that we are supporting all out days and other things like that. That's all part of this general thing. They might seem piecemeal, but actually it's all part of what we're trying to do with the lead up to the games. But that legacy that we could easily also put in is, if that's the state that the city is in at the games, we should be trying to ensure it stays that way after the games.
As you said,
we have a lot of work to do, certainly.
It is,
and this is not
graffiti.
Graffiti. Yeah.
I knew you were going to say graffiti.
That's right. Not our committee, but we are still plugging away. I'm still plugging away on this group with John Cotton and John O'Shea about a more joined up policy on that. But you only have to walk down, I'm afraid, the Fazeley Canal, you know, from Brindley Place to see that other agencies are not doing their bit. And I know the deputy leader was interested in trying to push Canals and Rivers Trust to be a bit more active.
Before we go to Councillor Sharp, can I commend the interim director for his PowerPoint presentation?
Thank you.
There we are.
Thank you, Vice Chair.
I'm impressed.
Sorry, we got defib.
An unsolicited testimonial. There we are. Very good. Councillor Sharp.
It's only a quick one. Can I ask what we're doing for people with disabilities?
Right.
Well, what I mean by that is, will there be people who will have, I don't know, but I would say, different colour Ivy's jackets on, so people with disabilities know who they are?
Yeah, there is a whole programme of volunteering across the games, but we will also have our enforcement wardens who will be clearly visible to people. But given that the Commonwealth Games is I think it's the only sporting event that has a joint disability and able-bodied element, there is a massive amount of work to ensure that that's going on. If I give you, for instance, the Smithfield site has got a live site, festival site they're called, a practice area and the temporary stadium for basketball and beach volleyball. Now it provides, for me, in insurance terms, I'm trying to look and say, how are we getting anybody has any ambulant issues, how are we getting people in and out of the site if there is an evacuation needed? So that sort of thing there is all part of our plans, and we're really working hard on that to get that right, and challenging the OC that has to be better than the initial proposals. But they are very attuned to it as well.
Okay. We've got a number of venues, obviously, which will have been uprated or whatever. I mean, there's the Alexander Stadium is the biggest change, isn't it? How is the SAG regime affected by that? Obviously we have the regime that normally, and we get an annual report here now, don't we? Right. That involves, proper checks and the rest of that. But this is a lot more work in that respect as well, presumably, isn't it?
It is. I would say that if you take on board the OC events and the non-OC events, it's probably going to be more than double the workload for the licensing team, the entertainment's licensing team, we imagine, partly because there's a wish to have a party for 12 days, that sort of thing going on. So what we've done is we've got our existing, and Edgbaston's a good example. Edgbaston already has a safety certificate under the Safety at Sports Grounds Act, and we will be running SAGs for the cricket season as is, because that's run in a certain way, and then you have a SAG separately for the OC controlled time. And that is run through a similar process, but different. But we've set the assurances we need, the deliverables that they've got to come up with to assure us that that's going to be run safely. Particularly as the OC will not necessarily be using the same management. They look at each site and decide which one they're going to use. So in our case at the Alex, we have not managed it as a stadium before, although we've got a test event next month. And what will happen is the OC will bring their people in to do that. So we have that's a completely different organising committee to do it. Yes, you've then got all the entertainment licenses. We run, I think pretty much most of them we run SAGs on anyway if they're anything over a certain size, and so we actually run those. They're not the ones that we come and report back on, but we've set up two arrangements because really we didn't have the internal resource within all the teams that get involved in that to do that separately. The Commonwealth Games side are bringing in a team. I've brought in a team that runs that, so it's additional. We're supporting them all. Reg and enforcement are going either way. That's why we need additional resource to try and deal with it. But we've got that money's there. The influx of resource will happen early in the new financial year.
Okay.
In April.
Yes, Councillor.
What about, I read in the Birmingham Mail about sexual health in terms of distribution of condoms. This happens at all large sporting events. What about sexual health in general in terms of your exec feed and all the rest of it, does that come under
That-
licensing really?
No, it doesn't. It will come under the public health side to it. So that's both the UK HSA and local directors of public health across each of the venue authorities. They've put together a strategy that actually says how they're going to support with the provision of condoms and the like. I'm not close enough to it, but I can try and find out more information for you.
So we're not installing like the cardboard beds, Tokyo. That was a regulatory.
If we are, I am entirely unaware.
Public Health will be able to answer questions on that note.
Yeah.
Okay, right, colleagues. Well, thank you very much, and thank you particularly to the Assistant Director for a very comprehensive look at the preparations for the Commonwealth Games.
Chair, the next report, then, if that's only for noting that one.
Yep.
The next report is the Food Hygiene Inspections Recovery. We've got Mr. Lowe here.
All right. Okay.
So
Hello.
he's resting my voice for me.
And you're the operations manager for food standards. Yeah. Thanks. Okay. Okay. Well, members have got the paper, which obviously summarises the position. So, would you like to just make a few introductory remarks?
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this report sets out our food recovery plan for the period from October 2021 to March 2023. Just to put that into context, prior to that, from the start of the pandemic, effectively normal service was suspended. And up until October last year, essentially the only inspections we were doing were in premises where there was complaints received or intelligence that there were problems. So effectively the whole programme was suspended. The recovery plan was set by the Food Standards Agency and details how we approach inspections of premises in future, and that's both premises that we know about and premises which are registered with us during the pandemic period that we were unable to inspect, so what we call unrated premises. You'll see in the section titled Recovery Plan Timeline that there were two phases to it. So phase one, which was July to September last year, was essentially building up to the start of the inspection programme. A lot of this work was around prioritisation of those businesses that were unrated. So we had approximately 2,000 unrated businesses that had registered with us that had not been inspected. So that period, we contacted all of those and undertook what we call a prioritisation exercise. And the purpose of that was to essentially order them to make sure that the highest, what we perceive to be the highest rated food businesses were prioritised first, and the lower risk were prioritised later on. Phase two then from October was the start of the inspection process itself, and you can see from the diagram the target dates. So for each of those target dates, the boxes at the bottom, you'll see that there are different types of premises that are categorised. So by the end of this year, we have to have inspected, by the end of March, we have to have inspected all our previously Category A rated premises, plus those that through the prioritisation exercise we perceived would be in that high category as well. By June, it's all Category B inspections, and again, those unrated that we perceived to be would fall within that category. And then further and further. So September, it's Category Cs where they're less than broadly compliant. So Category Cs are less than broadly compliant are those which are 0, 1 and 2 rated. So 3, 4 and 5 are considered to be broadly compliant. 0s, 1s and 2s are considered to be not broadly compliant. So by the end of this calendar year, all Ds which are not broadly compliant, and then by the end of March 2023, the remaining Cs. So what you'll notice is that the broadly compliant Ds and the Category Es are not included in the recovery programme. So the Food Standards Agency have mandated that we're not required to do those during the recovery programme period. In conjunction with this, and you'll see the two sort of darker arrows that come across, there are some things that we are required to do throughout the whole period, and they're detailed in the next section. So things like official controls, where we're supporting trade work, reactive work, which is complaint work, food hazards, outbreaks. we have to do that all through that period. Any sampling that we required, any surveillance, and again, any new businesses that register during that period, we should put them through the same prioritisation exercise that we did previously and decide when they fit into the food programme. Also, we are required, so those businesses that we do inspect, we rate them. If they apply for a re-rating, then we should undertake that as well throughout the whole period. So our recovery plan is set out in the appendix, and that basically deals with those timelines that we mentioned earlier, and actually details the figures as fitting into those timelines. So you'll see that at different times we've got, so target 1 is up to the end of March, which effectively we've only got to do the category A's up until the end of March, but actually there aren't that many of them. And if you look at the figures for each of those categories, we couldn't do them in the 3-month blocks. So what we've had to do is bring some of them forward. So for the first 6 months of the food recovery period, we've only got about 70, 80 category A's to be inspected. So we brought a lot of the C's forward to do that. So essentially, if you look at the bit down the bottom of the diagram, you'll see that what we're looking at is a target of about 200 inspections a month throughout the whole period of the recovery plan. So what we've had to do is schedule the inspections across all of that, ensuring as much as possible that we meet the deadlines, but bringing forward inspections when we can bring them forward. That diagram also tells you some of the variations and risks. Obviously, we've got new registrations that are coming in during that period. We are anticipating a higher rate of follow-up, and that's certainly what's happening. The figures suggest that because premises have not been visited a long time, there's a lot more enforcement work that has to be done. So in the 3 months from October to December, we serve more statutory notices than we normally do in a whole year. So we are having additional problems. Also, obviously, at the Commonwealth Games, there will inevitably a dip in inspections during that period. The mitigations that we've got are with the funding that we've brought in through the primary authority work, UK HSA work, and the FSA funding is to bring in agency staff to supplement that work. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for the recommendation is that the committee approve the plan.
Chair, one other comment, and I think it's fair to say that we are on track at the moment, but the key time does come around September when all of the Cs that we think may need to be inspected, plus all the unrateds. I think it's we're probably in the best position we've been for some years in the views of the Food Standards Agency and being up to date with our food law and enforcement plan. So that's a great deal of credit to Nick and his colleagues to getting us to there, because you know where we were.
Yeah.
We were on that fourth naughty step, and actually that's something that we needed to get off very quickly. And I say it is a credit. We are now on track, and there's no time for us to relax, but we are on track, and we'll bring you regular advice on that. Now it's back in our quarterly enforcement activity report to show we're on track or off track. So you're fully aware.
Okay. Any questions or? I think we can all endorse that. Any questions or comments? We will be getting the update reports, as we've said. Okay, so thank you for that. And can we approve the report? Agreed. Okay, thank you. Right. Okay, so next item, date and time of next meeting. Now,
this is my last meeting.
In person it is, Mike, because April the 13th we've got an online meeting, but say what you want to say.
I'd just like to thank the officers for the help and support they give me in the short time that I've been on here. I wish you all the well in the future. Okay. Especially you, because you're good in September as well.
Yes, I know, yeah.
Well, can I just...
I hope you brought a season ticket for the Villa.
No, I haven't actually.
Well, can I just thank every member, particularly Councillor Sharp, we know he won't be returning, but there may be others who aren't returning. We've got we've got the online meeting on the 13th, but as this is in person, I wish everybody the best for the elections if you are standing. And if you're not, thank you very much for your service to the committee over the years. And as I say, the April 13th will be the next one online, the usual briefing. So please do join us then if you can. No other urgent business has been notified to me.
No.
So I'll move the final item in an urgent situation between meetings of the chair jointly with the relevant chair, chief officer has authority to act on behalf of the committee. Is that agreed? Okay. Right. Thank you very much.